All right. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this webinar on Covidence. I'm Becca Billings. I'm the Systematic Reviews Coordinator at Lister Hill Library and a part of UAB Libraries. Last week, we talked about the various types of reviews that you can conduct. And this week, we're talking about Covidence, which will help you streamline your workflow for a variety of different evidence synthesis projects. I'm going to start in these slides, and all of these slides will be shared with you and the recording as well after. We're going to talk a little bit about the basics of Covidence, the agenda for today, and then I'm actually going to demo it more live time because it's just easier to work that way instead of speaking through PowerPoint slides. So how many of you have used Covidence? You'd put it in the chat. I'm just curious to see how many of you have worked with Covidence before, or if this is kind of your first introduction to it. Yes, several times. Okay. 5 times. New to me. Okay. Awesome. So several of you are new to it, and then there are several of you that have used it a few times. So we got some newbies, so that's good. I'm hoping that everybody will learn something a little different. And if you have more questions about it, you can always email any of the librarians and we will help you. So thank you for answering that. So as far as Covidence, Covidence is a screening tool. So this is something that we've had with UAB libraries for a few years now. We used to have something called Distiller SR, and it's a great tool. It's very expensive, but it is not intuitive at all. And you really have to be familiar with the systematic review process in order to figure out where to start. With Covidence, you create an account, you sign in, you create a project, and then you import references and start screening. And it walks you through all aspects of the review, which makes it helpful. So a few of the settings that we are going to talk, a few of the components that we're going to talk about with Covidence is how to create a Covidence review, how to format your settings for the type of review you are going to be conducting, references, how to screen and upload full text to do the full text screening. Another great feature about Covidence is that it's going to build out the Prisma flowchart for you as you screen. And there are also embedded quality assessment tools and a data extraction form that is in there that you can adapt as well for your needs. And then you can export all of your information in a spreadsheet. All right, so the Cochrane community heavily uses Covidence, and they define it as a web-based software platform that streamlines the production of systematic reviews. But again, you can use Covidence for a literature review assignment anywhere that you're looking at quite a few references, and you don't necessarily want to use a citation software tool like EndNote or Zotero to screen. You can use Covidence to do that. So there are different tools and they serve different purposes. But we are going to get into that now. So the first place that we can start is our UAB Libraries Covidence Guide. So the librarians have created a research guide that will give you all the information I'm talking about today from start to end as far as using Covidence. So I'm going to click here and I'm going to exit out of these slides. Move it over. Now you should just see the Covidence review guide. If you have never used Covidence before, it is a British company who owns it. Oh, let me zoom out. I'm trying to zoom out so you can see. All right, but if you're a first-time user, you can sign up with the software here. You have to use your UAB email address or a uabmc.edu email address in order to access it. And if you have an account from another institution, you're going to switch over those accounts for your current UAB email address, and you would just request access over here. So we have this little box of that gives you the steps of signing up with a Covidence account. So you would just click sign up here, put in your UAB email address and your name and request an invitation. And then after a couple minutes, you will get an email to confirm your account, click that and it will let you sign in to Covidence and create a password. The password doesn't have to be a UAB specific password. It can be whatever you want it to be. Then what's helpful about this, since it's a web-based platform, and also real quick, I'll show you how to get to it from just the library's homepage. We're on Lister Hill's homepage, but you can get to Covidence from the databases guide or from the databases list. And this is also another way that you can sign up with Covidence. And then you can also get to the Covidence information. If you go from if you're starting from our homepage, just go to research and then research guides. And then it's under the how-to guides. Let's scroll down a little bit. And under useful databases and tools, Covidence guide will be right here. And that's also how you can sign up. But once you have completed your sign up, you can just Google UAB Live, or you can just Google Covidence. Click sign in. And this is going to be your Covidence dashboard. What's helpful about this is you can see all of the current projects that you are working on. So I have a list right now of active reviews that I have ongoing that I'm importing references in for other teams. So that's why I have so many. But if you are finished with something, I don't recommend deleting it. I recommend archiving it so that you don't see it on your main dashboard, but you can still get back to it if you need to, especially if you have a review that is for publication. You might need to get to that data at another time. James, can you mute everybody, please? So here you can go into your archived reviews and see everything that you worked on in the past. And then you can unarchive it if something comes up and you're working with the project actively again, and then it's going to show back up into your current reviews. If you need to delete something, you would click on the review and it would take you in to the project. And then you would go into your settings and then delete the review. I'm not going to do this because this is an active project, but it does make sure that you understand that you are completely deleting the review and you won't be able to access the data ever again. You have to check these 3 boxes and select, yes, I'm sure to delete this review. Okay, so once you create your Covidence review, now you're all set to start creating projects for your literature reviews. So the first thing that you do is you're going to go into your settings in the upper right-hand corner. Oh, let me create a new one. Sorry. So you go up into the upper left corner, click on Covidence, and it's going to take you back to your dashboard. I'm going to click Start a New Review, and it's going to ask you some required prompts that you need to fill out in order to create it. So the default radio button is set to no on Are you creating a Cochrane review, which is pretty much 95% going to be no, you're not doing a Cochrane systematic review. You can name your review. This is a working title that you can change at any time. So I'm just going to do, usually how I name it for researchers is I'll put the main researcher's last name, the type of review it is. So like, I'll just say, and then I'll give like a topic. So we'll just do like HPV and just do 9-valent vaccine or something. You can change this later. The next thing that you do is select your review type. What's nice about Covidence is it has, so like what we talked about last week, you can learn about the different review types to help you select the options here. If you select other, I think it still makes you specify the type of review. I'm just going to hit literature review, but you can break out into a new window and learn more about the different review types to help you make a decision. And so it gives you information on umbrella reviews, scoping reviews. And what's really helpful is it bases a lot of this information on one of those core articles that I talked about last week on meeting the family of systematic reviews. And so then you can get acquainted and get more information here, and it will link to publication examples. All right. So I'm changing this back to a literature review. And you can change all of this later if you need to, but you will set up something at the very beginning. Under question type, you might He's looking at a therapy study, etc. I'm just going to do prognostic study, and then you would select your area of research. So if you're doing an evidence synthesis project in another area, you can select that. So if you're doing something with business or engineering, psychology, specify all of that. Now, there are two automation features that are relatively new that they've built into Covidence. One is tag references reporting on RCTs, and the other is to remove references that are not randomized control trials before screening, which is an early access feature. I do not ever, ever, ever recommend to do this if you are not also going to screen through quickly to see what it has removed. You never know what it's going to remove. So always double check that. Don't just blindly rely on a lot of these tools. They're really great, and I love the AI stuff, but you have to double down and make sure that they're not eliminating something that you don't know about. So don't, if you do select it, it's going to show up in your automatically removed irrelevant references. So you can check, and if there's a mistake, you can add it back to your review. But one thing that I would encourage you to do is just go ahead and tag the references that report on randomized control trials, because they might help you screen faster. Okay, lastly, some of our researchers get a little confused by these options. Whenever you first create a Covidence account, you have like one trial review that will let you practice, and you can honestly create a regular review and practice with it. I encourage you guys to do that before you do any kind of higher level systematic review or something. It's a good idea to practice your protocol. I'm not going to talk much about that though. Just select unlimited reviews here as part of your affiliation with UAB libraries. You can create an unlimited number of reviews with Covidence, and you can invite an unlimited number of reviewers to your team in a specific review, even if they're not UAB affiliates, and they have full access to that review. Then you hit create. And under your settings, you have your reviewers, so you can invite another reviewer with their information. They have to accept the invite on their end through their email. And you can also do a lot of other features here. So there's team settings. So as this will also show you progress of individual team members in the review process. Now, Covidence was originally created for systematic reviews, so it's really important to have blinding in Covidence. So there are some things that you can't see just because they don't make it accessible because of blinding to keep rigorous methodology in your review type. So it's not going to show you, Becca voted yes on this specific article or no on this one. You just can't, it's just not made to do that. But you can see how many they have screened. So one thing that you can do to set up your project, I have a lot of nursing faculty who want to be able to assign specific articles to people to screen. You can't do that in Covidence, but what I would recommend is to kind of balance the work, under team settings, just say, go to team settings and see how many reviews you have conducted, or how many titles you've screened, I should say, and then maybe try and match a specific number within a certain time frame. So try and screen 100 articles in the next few days. You could do that, but you can't assign. You can assign specific rules for people as far as what they can do. So with Covidence, it's set into 3 phases. You have your title and abstract screening. Then you have your full text review stage where you actually have to read the article and then make a decision. And then you have the extraction stage. The extraction stage is going to have all of your studies that you plan on including in your research paper. Those made it, and they meet all of your criteria. So you could say, I only want these people screening at the title abstract stage. By default, everything is set on everyone can do anything. So you can have all of your team members helping to screen title abstract. Or you can say, I only want this person to resolve conflicts. And you can do that at each stage. I'm going to back up for now, and I'll talk about these guys later. Okay, so once you have that basic thing set up, you go back into settings, and there's a couple other things that you should know about. The default, again, because it's set for systematic reviews and scoping reviews, the systematic reviews, they need to have at least 2 screeners per citation to vote. And it's good to have a third person to resolve conflicts. But if you were just doing a literature review, you would just need like 1 person to vote per citation. Like you wouldn't have to have 2 votes. So you would want to narrow this down to 1. And then you can get information on which extraction tool to select as well. If you have just 1 screener, the extraction 2 is going to be good, because you have single reviewer extractions that are built in, and you aren't required to have 2 screeners. If you were doing a systematic review, a meta-analysis, you would want to keep the reviewers to 2. And then you'd want to select the extraction 1 form. The extraction 1 form is basically going to affect your data extraction and quality assessment templates that we will talk about later. So just make sure you save it. The last thing to note here, when the librarians do the searches, I always put the date that I ran the last search. So that is the date that I ran the final database searches and it imported the results that you'll be looking at in this review. And now it is inverted in the date because it's a British company. So just keep that in mind, but I'll usually copy and paste the search strategies in here. Okay. Do you have any questions about that so far? All right, so I will continue on. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how to import references. So I'm going to just quickly go in and pull up an EndNote library on my end, and I'm going to pull up just a quick PubMed search to get started. So I have 3 screens up, so let me try and okay, just real quick. I know you guys are all here. Let me minimize. So I'm just going to go and create an EndNote library for this project because I'll show you how you have to save files to import or to export them later. So I'm just going to create just a general EndNote library. Save it on my desktop. Okay. Anytime I'm doing a literature search for someone, I have an individual EndNote library for each project, much like I do with a Covidence review. So I often like to group them by the databases that I've searched, which I'm not going to get into too much detail here, but okay. So now I'm going to reshare my first screen. And we're going to just go in and do a quick search. So I'm going to go back to UAB Libraries and Lister Hill Libraries page. And I'm just going to do a search in PubMed. Let me get into all of that right now. I'm sorry.
Becca, we do have a quick question. Jonathan asked, when do we use the single reviewer option?
So just do the single reviewer option whenever it's just you screening the literature. So if you're doing just a literature review, or you're doing something for a class assignment, you don't have to have dual screeners and you don't have to have a lot of other reviewers, just leave it to 1. Or if you're just working through where you need 1 person to make the votes on everything, then you can just do it that way. Okay, so I'm just going to do HPV. Sorry, I don't know why I'm trying to think through this more, but okay. I'll just do that. Okay, let's just say that I want to import these 114 citations. Maybe they're perfect for what I need. So I'm going to import these citations, say this is my final search. I'm going to just send this to a citation manager, all results, create file, and then it's going to save in your downloads, however you have your stuff set up on your computer. Let me minimize this screen so you can see them both. Okay, so when I click on my downloads, it's going to drop all of those into my EndNote library. Often what I like to do, this is just because I have a tick and I need to do it a certain way. I don't really have a tick, but I just have a system. So I just like to name the database that I found the results in as well. So if I import a lot of things, you'll learn after you do these over and over again, you'll make a mistake and then you have to have a different process. But I like to just move them into my group after I name them. Um, you can, you need to have your file, your EndNote library, which is usually like a RIS file that you save. You're going to have to change it to an XML file to import it into Covidence. And then if you ever forgot this step, we can always meet with you and show you how to do this. But basically from your EndNote library or your Zotero library, whatever, you're going to select all of the references that you want to import into Covidence, and they're going to go to File and Export. Now it's going to open up this box. Just the process that I like to do as a librarian, I like to name the file at the beginning as an XML file, underscore, found it in PubMed, and I like to just document how many article citations this file has, so that I don't have to try and open it again and just guess. Save it to wherever you want to save it. And then under Save File Type As, just make it XML. So I'll let you kind of see that for a second. So again, you're going to select all of those citations that you want to import from your EndNote library or any citation manager tool. Select those, go to File, Export, and it's going to pull up this box. You can name the file however you want to. I personally like to say XML file in the database with how many results I've retrieved, and then save it where you need to, and then XML is the file type that it needs to be saved as. Okay, so it doesn't look like it did anything, but my file is saved on my desktop. So you can always just locate it. Here it is. So now I'm going to go into Covidence and I'm going to import. So you're always going to start at import at screening stage in most cases. Now there is another feature in Covidence where you can strictly say all of these citations were found in PubMed. So you have a drop down of some default databases. If you don't see the one on your list, just go to Manage Sources and then you can add another one. Okay, so we found this in PubMed. So now I'm going to browse and find that XML file on my desktop and hit open and then import. And it actually moves really fast. I shouldn't say that because usually when I do, it moves very slow. But it drops those citations into your review and then you're able to start the screening process. Now, if you made a mistake and you accidentally selected a couple of articles and EndNote, but not the whole thing, go to your view details and you can actually undo the import. Now, if you've already voted on something, you can't. You just have to either create a new review or just keep the number track in your head. But you can undo it if you have to. From this page under import history, you can also manage your sources. And then from there, say, oh, actually, this was found in clinical trials. I made a mistake. And then you can save it if you need to. So there's a lot of flexibility. If you make a mistake, don't freak out. Just play with it. It's really intuitive, mostly. So anyway, so let me go back. I'm going to re-import that since we undid the import. And And while that's going on, I'm going to go into my settings and just double check that I've made it to one screener. Yeah. And then save. And then I'm going to back up out of my settings to go back to my review summary, which is the dashboard. Okay, so it also will automatically show how many duplicates have been retrieved. So as you do searches in other databases, you will inevitably have duplicates, and it will automatically remove those for you. You can, if you had a number up here, like 5 duplicates removed, you can click on it and it will pull up duplicates, and you can actually go in and say, actually, this is not a duplicate, and you can move it back to the screening stage. You also have the way to manually remove duplicate records. So now we're in the title abstract stage. I'm going to hit continue. Oh, and this is also where if you had invoked that remove non-RCTs, they would show up here. And you could click on the link and double check what has been removed. So researchers, if you're head of a project and you have students screening, you can go back and double check that they're screening what they're supposed to based on your criteria. And if a mistake is made, you can always undo it and move it back most of the time. Okay, you can also adjust your team settings here if you need to restrict who does what. We're going to click on continue, and at the title abstract screening stage, this should be really quick. You are not trying to review the whole paper and understand like every aspect of what they did in their study. It's just quick, like couple seconds. Is this relevant to what I need? If this was a duplicate, you could say, oh, this needs to be eliminated. This is where you can kind of screen through. One thing that I do recommend is to add highlights. It just makes it easier on your eyes to screen. This is where you can also go into your settings and set up your eligibility criteria. You have highlights up here. And if you're doing a lot of screening, it can be really cumbersome on your eyes. You could just do certain keywords that you want flagged in green that might indicate that something is relevant to your topic. And you could also add terms that might not be relevant at all. So I'm just going to do HPV here and then 9-valent. Hit done. This is also where you can say, this is my eligibility criteria. Here is what I'm focusing on in this specific review. I encourage you all to write it up. And I'm not going to go into as much detail on this one, but this is also where you can go to the full text exclusion reasoning, and I'll talk about that next. So let me back up into settings and go into the title abstract stage. But now you can see I can show highlights, and now those phrases are in green. So they're not necessarily going to be relevant to your topic, but they make it easier to screen. And you can do exclusions and they would highlight in red. So 2 no's will move it automatically to irrelevant. 2 yeses will automatically move it to the full text screening stage. A maybe, I think, also moves to full text stage. And then if you had dual reviewers, if somebody said maybe and yes, those move to full text. Maybe and no, that's a conflict resolution. That's a third person has to come in and vote. And then there's yes and no, that's also a conflict. So now I'm going to, it will also let you know how many conflicts need to be resolved, how many are complete, how many are irrelevant, and if there needs to be another reviewer voting on something. So let's pretend we are done with the title abstract stage. The next stage is the full text review. So it shows that there are 2 to be screened at the full text stage. We're going to go into continue, and much the same as what we did with the title abstract stage, there are only 2 options at this stage. So you have include or exclude. Include means that this fits all of my criteria, and you can also show your criteria as the toggle button up here, and you can make edits as needed. If you found that something actually should not have been at this stage, it should have been removed at title abstract stage, you can move it back to screening. You can also make notes about certain references. Now, again, this is not blinded, this portion. So if you're doing a systematic review, just be mindful of the content that you put. So you wouldn't want to say Becca voted yes or no, like you would never do that. But if you had something that you wanted to discuss as a team, maybe you had a question about it, or maybe I as a librarian will come in and say, Becca requested via ILL. You could also make a tag about that, so that you can also sort through information too. If you say exclude, you have to give a reason. So there are these default reasonings for how to or for why something needs to be excluded. Now, this part is pretty to the point, but I will recommend that in your protocol or as a team, you need to discuss which ones are the highest priority and the first reason that something should be excluded. Like try and put them in order, because at this stage, if you had two screeners and they voted no, but they gave a different exclusion reason, it's going to flag as a conflict. And so somebody's going to have to vote and say, what is the most important reason on why this is not relevant? So just keep that in mind. Also at full text stage, this is where you actually want to read the paper. So there is the bulk upload of full text, and it has instructions on how to do this. Usually if I'm on a review, and I can meet with you and do this individually too, mostly I do this part and I will upload based on the EndNote library, all of those full text. If it's an open access article, Covidence automatically adds that article for you. So right now, see, you have full text uploaded by Covidence, open access, so you can just read the PDF. What's good about adding the full text at this stage is that once you're in extraction, the article is going to pull up at the same time as the data extraction form. So you're doing the screening and voting in like one place, which just makes it a little bit easier. Okay, you also have the DOIs that will often take you to the full text article as well, so you can view the PDF there. But the full text stage is where you do want to kind of skim through the full article and look for those inclusion and exclusion criteria. Are we good with that so far? So I'm just going to say include. And we're going to back out of that. That last stage is going to be the extraction stage. Now, part of this I'm going to talk about next week in the risk of bias tool session. But as you voted, we're quickly going to go into Prisma, and you can see the breakdown of the numbers. So this is how many we originally started with in this database. This is how many duplicates were removed either manually or automatically by Covidence. This is how many have been screened at the title abstract stage and marked as irrelevant. And this is how many were at full text stage. And then once you go through the form, it's going to actually give you the breakdown of exclusion criteria. And then you have one study that made it to exclusion or extraction. Okay, so at extraction, hit continue, and this is where you actually have to have well, you don't have to have everything done in Covidence necessarily. Let me back up that statement. At this stage, some teams prefer strongly to take this out and use their own matrix table. Others strongly want everything done in Covidence. Either is fine, it's your team's preference. Now, this is where you want to have the article uploaded. Man, I should have chosen that other one. Let me back up. And I'll grab that other one. Okay, include. Now back to extraction. Now, right now, you don't have any votes because you haven't yet created your templates. There are two steps in this stage. If you're doing a systematic review or a rapid review, umbrella review, and you are going to, and then with scoping reviews, you're going to do a data extraction template. If you click on this, this is just an example of what you could use and what kind of questions you might want to ask. at the extraction stage. Now, most often the team will get together and manipulate this form. You could choose to start from scratch. I think it's nice to kind of have the headings here where you can make any changes. So all of this is going to later be exported into a CS or an Excel spreadsheet that you can use later. Sometimes people get really confused at this stage, and even though I tell them this is your form, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to keep any of this information. Just delete it if it's not relevant. So for instance, the study ID, when you export, it's given a number by Covidence, so I don't know. I just leave that blank at this point, but you can actually see the number here, which is usually what falls into that table unless they change something. So anyway, let me go back. So this is a heading and it shows you how it will look under the preview. So if you want to make any changes, just click on one of the fields and then start adjusting. So okay, so see, as I make a change here, it's showing you the preview on how it will look once it's final. So if I didn't want this information, I would click it and just delete it. Title, you usually don't have that in your Prisma. I'm just going to delete this information. Most often at the extraction stage, you're going to look at your protocol and you're going to specify what do I want to know and summarize about each of the articles. What am I synthesizing? So often you'll start with like the author date. Whenever you're citing your sources, you'll have that information. Then you might have something about the population, or if you want to know specifically if it's relevant, the country that the study was conducted in. And then you can make other changes as well. So I think here, let's just do something like that. You can just make those changes as you go. And then you have like the aim of the study. Maybe you're looking at a specific diagnostic tool. You might have that as a table or as a column that you want to do. But in order, and then you have over here instructions to extractors that you can make if needed. So here, let me just, if I click on a plus sign anywhere, you can create a new question. So you have your headings, your subheadings, then you have the text field for open-ended questions, single choice, checkboxes, and table. So if you find that this form isn't in depth enough for what you need, you could always take it and use something else that your team wants to. It doesn't matter. It's your project. Let's just do a single choice. So I don't know. Let's just do like symptoms or something. And then you could, well, this is a single choice. Maybe I want like check boxes or something. So you could just do, I don't know what to put for this. So, let's see. Or something like, I don't know. You could just kind of fill out based on what is relevant to your project. Once you go through the form, or if you wanted to start from scratch, you could do that. Hit publish. Now, if you publish it and you need to make changes, you can. But this is where you would begin your extraction. And actually, let me back up to the one that has the PDF. Oh, I thought one of them did. View full text. Yeah. So begin extraction. And then the article is right there on the left. And then based on the abstract and the article, you can start filling out this information. And then once you are done voting, you can save it and come back to it later. Or if you've completed your screening, you can mark it as complete. If you had two screening, you would have to share it as the consensus, like we are done, have the reviewers look at it, begin checking. And then you could go on next to the quality assessment template. And I'll talk more about this next week, but the quality assessment template, for this one, it's specifically a risk of bias tool. It's the ROB one risk of bias tool for systematic reviews. For scoping review and other review types that are not systematic reviews, you don't have to do this portion. I'm going to talk more about this next week though, so we are going to skip this. Okay. So let me go back. If you needed to export any of this information, you would go here to on the dashboard, your review summary page. In the upper right-hand corner, you would go to export. And this is actually, oh, I forgot to mention tags. There is a feature in Covidence, much like the highlights, and setting up your inclusion and exclusion criteria, but you have study tags that can also come in useful, especially so kind of the more common one is if an article is relevant, but it's not, maybe it's relevant for your background information or writing the intro or something, but it's not necessarily going to meet inclusion criteria for your final study, you could always add a tag and name it whatever you want. So like maybe this would be good background information. And when you go to export, you can go into your excluded studies or irrelevant studies, and then export them as a CSV file. And then when you get your CSV file, you can sort it by those tags if you need to be able to access it later. But say you're done with extraction, you can choose to export your consensus data, your quality assessment data, and you can choose to do your full consensus and individual data as well. So if you try and do this before everybody is done voting, you're going to get the notice that this can increase bias in your review process. If you're looking at this data, then it's no longer blinded if you do it early. But let's just go. I'll just do all data and prepare file. And then eventually it is going to finish downloading. You hit download, and then this is where the CSV file is going to be. Let me open that. Take a second there. And then how it is formatted in the Excel spreadsheet, the headings are going to be based on those columns in the data extraction form. So you have that Covidence ID, study ID. Sorry, it filled out the author and year for you. Okay. So it gives you the title, who reviewed the data, aim of the study, and this is whatever you filled out, and then study findings, etc. So all of this information is going to be formatted. So there are teams that don't like it formatted this way, and that's fine. There are other teams that this is how they would sort it anyway, but it gives you the Excel spreadsheet for the results. Right. And then you're also able to export that Prisma file as well. You can download it as a Word document. So that's kind of the basics of using Covidence. I do recommend creating a test Covidence review for a project that you're working on, just so that you and your team can screen through like 5 or 10 articles and just say, hey, based on these articles, this is how we want to fill it out and for real with our final project. So it's good to just test it and play with it with 1 or 2 team members to just get used to the software too. But it's fairly easy to use and it does save a lot of time. I think it saves 35% or 71 hours per review. And this is if you're working with tons of literature, of course, but yeah. So I am going to stop my sharing and take a look at the chat. Okay, does anybody have any questions now? All right. Well, thank you for attending. Next week, I'm going to talk about quality assessment and strictly risk of bias tools. And then the difference between risk of bias tools and systematic reviews versus critical appraisal. So we'll talk about that. I'll give you some examples and then have an example on how you might create that form in Covidence is the goal. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Y'all have a wonderful day.
I had a quick question. Sorry. So if multiple, so since you can't assign articles to certain users,
Right.
I'm guessing if multiple users are logged in at the same time though, like if someone has something open, I'm guessing it won't allow someone else to, like multiple
If it's
people
whoever
can.
gets to it first, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
so you won't have to worry about that. Thank you all. Yeah, but that's a good question because we do, I do get a lot of questions on how we might be able to give certain records to certain people. Now you can display it differently. So you might have somebody set the results by author or by title versus relevancy. So, I mean, that's a way that you could go about it. But yeah, it's not going to let anybody screen more than twice if you have it set up to 2 screeners. But good question. All right. So I will go ahead and stop the recording. And I will see you all next week, hopefully.